The stars looked peaceful now. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Retribution and watched the distant lights through the main window. 3 months ago, those same stars had been filled with burning ships and death. Now everything was quiet, too quiet. Jake ran his hand through his dark hair and checked the time display. They had been out here for over a year now, far from Earth and far from home. The last message from Earth Command had come 8 months ago. Since then, nothing but silence. "Captain," called Lieutenant Commander Lisa Harper from her station. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I'm picking up something on the long-range sensors." Jake walked over to her station. Lisa was the smartest person on the ship, maybe the smartest person he had ever met. If she said there was something out there, there was definitely something out there. "What do you see?" Jake asked. Lisa pointed at her screen. 3 ships moving fast. They look like Zephyrian cargo vessels, but they're heavily escorted. 2 destroyers and a cruiser. Jake nodded. The Zephyrians were their enemy. At least they had been their enemy when this war started. The blue-skinned aliens had attacked human colonies without warning 2 years ago. Since then, Earth had been fighting them across half the galaxy. "Are they heading anywhere important?" Jake asked. "The Vega system," Lisa said. "Big trading hub. If they're carrying supplies there, it could mean they're still fighting." Jake thought about this. The Retribution had been out here for so long that they had lost contact with the main war. They had been ordered to disrupt enemy supply lines, and that's exactly what they had been doing. Hit-and-run attacks, taking out cargo ships, making life difficult for the enemy. But sometimes Jake wondered if the war was still going on. "Sir," said Amy Carter from the weapons station. Amy was young but deadly accurate with the ship's guns. "Should we intercept?" Jake looked around his bridge. These people had followed him into the dark between stars. They had fought impossible battles and won them all. The Retribution was Earth's most advanced warship, but it was the crew that made. Her special chief engineer Pete Collins looked up from his repair reports. Pete could fix anything, and he had made their ship better than the day it left Earth's shipyards. "The ship's ready for action, Captain. We've got full power and all weapons online." Security Chief Danny Wright stood near the back of the bridge. Danny was a big man who didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. "My Marines are ready too. We can take any ship they've got." Jake made his decision. "Set course to intercept. We'll hit them fast and get out clean." The Retribution turned toward the enemy convoy. Jake's ship was special because it could hide from enemy sensors. Pete had modified the engines and power systems, so they gave off almost no energy signature. To enemy ships, the Retribution was nearly invisible. They moved closer to the convoy. Jake could see the 3 cargo ships now, each one as big as a city block. The escort ships stayed close, their weapons ready. "Lisa, scan those cargo ships. What are they carrying?" Jake ordered. Lisa worked at her station for several minutes. Then her face went pale. "Captain, you need to see this." Jake looked at her. Screen. The cargo ships weren't carrying weapons or military supplies. They were carrying people. Thousands of people. "Are they prisoners?" Jake asked. "No, sir," Lisa said quietly. "They're families. Zephyrian civilians, women and children. They're heading to the Vega system to start new colonies." Jake felt something cold in his stomach. Why would the enemy be moving civilian families if the war was still going on? "You didn't start new colonies while you were fighting a war, Doctor." Ben Rodriguez appeared on the bridge. Ben was the ship's doctor, but he was also one of the smartest men Jake knew. "Captain, I've been listening to enemy radio chatter. There's something strange going on." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "They're not talking like soldiers at war," Ben said. "They're talking about trade routes and peace negotiations. One of them mentioned something about a treaty." Jake felt the cold feeling get worse. A treaty? Had Earth made peace with the Zephyrians? If so, why hadn't anyone told them? "Captain," Amy said from her station, "the convoy is changing course. They're trying to avoid us. But they weren't running like warships would run. They were moving slowly, carefully, like they were protecting something precious, like they were protecting families." Jake stared at the enemy ships on his screen. If there really was a peace treaty, then those weren't enemy ships anymore. They were just people trying to go home. Stand down weapons, Jake ordered. Sir? Amy looked confused. You heard me. Stand down all weapons. We're not attacking that convoy. Danny stepped forward. Captain, what if this is a trick? What if they're using civilians as shields? Jake shook his head. Look at them, Danny, really look. Those escort ships aren't positioned for combat. They're positioned to protect the cargo ships from pirates or asteroids. This isn't a military convoy. The Retribution watched as the Zephyrian ships passed by safely. Jake knew he had made the right choice, but it raised bigger questions. If the war was over, why was his ship still out here? Why hadn't Earth Command contacted them? Lisa, Jake said. Try to make contact with Earth Command. Use the emergency frequencies. Lisa worked at her station for an hour. Finally, she looked up with frustration on her face. Nothing, Captain. Either our communications are broken or they're not answering. Jake sat in his captain's chair and thought. The Retribution was alone out here, with no orders and no contact, with home. They had been fighting a war that might already be over. But if the war was over, what did that mean for them? Set course for the nearest relay station, Jake ordered. We need to find out what's really going on. As the Retribution turned away from the convoy, Jake watched the Zephyrian ships disappear into the distance. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was changing. The question was whether Earth's deadliest ship still had a place in it. The Retribution floated in the shadow of a dead star. The massive red giant had burned out long ago, leaving behind a cold, dark shell. It was the perfect place to hide while they made repairs. Jake Morrison walked through the ship's corridors, checking on his crew. They had been out here too long. He could see it in their faces. The strain of constant fighting, of never knowing if they would see home again. In the engine room, Pete Collins was working on the quantum drive. Pete was covered in grease and sweat, but he was smiling. He always smiled when he was fixing something. How's she looking, Pete? Jake asked. Pete wiped his hands on a dirty cloth. Better than ever, Captain. I've made some changes to the stealth system. We can stay invisible for twice as long now. The enemy won't see us coming until it's too late. Jake nodded. Pete had turned the Retribution into something special. The ship could hide from any sensor, strike without warning, and disappear before the enemy knew what hit them. It was like having a ghost ship. Any word from the communications array? Jake asked. Pete's smile faded. Still nothing, Captain. We're too far out to reach Earth directly. We'd need to find a relay station, but most of them are in enemy territory. Jake left the engine room and went to the medical bay. Dr. Ben Rodriguez was treating wounded prisoners from their last battle. 3 Zephyrian soldiers sat on medical beds, their blue skin marked with bandages. How are they doing, Ben? Jake asked. Ben looked tired. They'll live. But Captain, I need to talk to you about something. These prisoners, they're different from the others we've captured. Different how? Ben pulled Jake aside and spoke quietly. They keep asking when they can go home. Not to their ships or their bases. Home to their families. One of them has pictures of his children. Another one keeps talking about his wife's cooking. Jake frowned. So they're not acting like soldiers in a war, Ben said. They're acting like people who think the fighting is over. Before Jake could respond, Lisa Harper's voice came over the ship's communication system. Captain, to the bridge. We have a situation. Jake hurried to the bridge. Lisa was at her station studying something on her screen. Amy Carter was at the weapons station, ready for trouble. What is it? Jake asked. Lisa pointed at her screen. I've been monitoring enemy communications. There's a lot of chatter about something called the Treaty of Kepler Station. Jake felt that cold feeling in his stomach again. A treaty? It gets worse, Lisa said. They're talking about human ships being ordered back to Earth. Something about restrictions on our military. Amy looked up from her station. Captain, does this mean the war is over? Jake didn't answer. He couldn't answer. If the war was over, what were they doing out here? What had all their fighting been for? There's more, Lisa continued. I picked up a transmission from a Zephyrian commander. He was bragging about how Earth had been defeated, how humans had agreed to stay in their own star system. Danny Wright appeared on the bridge. The big security chief looked angry. "Captain, are you telling me we've been fighting for nothing?" "We don't know anything for sure yet," Jake said. But even as he said it, he wondered if it was true. The bridge fell silent. Outside the viewports, the dead star cast no light. They were alone in the darkness, cut off from everything they had known. "Sir," said Navigation Officer Kate Johnson. Kate was usually quiet, but now she spoke up. "Maybe we should try to make contact with a neutral station. Find out what's really happening." Before Jake could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. Lisa's hands flew over her controls. "Contact," she shouted. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Zephyrian battle group, 3 destroyers and a cruiser. Jake's training took over. "Battle stations, Pete, give me full power to engines and weapons." The Retribution came alive as the crew rushed to their positions. Through the viewports, Jake could see the enemy ships. They were close, too close. How had they found them? "They're hailing us," Lisa reported. "Put them through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered, and a Zephyrian commander appeared. His blue skin was marked with battle scars and his eyes were cold. "Human vessel," the alien said. "You are in violation of the peace treaty. Surrender immediately, or we will destroy you." Jake stood up from his captain's chair. "This is Captain Morrison of the UES Retribution. We don't know anything about a treaty." The Zephyrian commander laughed. "Your government surrendered 3 months ago. Your ship has no authority to be in this sector. You are pirates now, nothing more." Pirates. The word hit Jake like a physical blow. His crew, his ship, everything they had fought for reduced to piracy. "We were following orders," Jake said. "Your orders are invalid," the commander replied. "Surrender now or face the consequences." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for his decision. Amy had her finger on the weapons controls. Danny was ready to fight. Lisa was calculating escape routes. "We need time to verify this treaty," Jake said. The Zephyrian commander's expression hardened. "You have 1 hour to surrender. After that, we will consider you hostile and act accordingly." The screen went dark. Jake sat back down in his chair, his mind racing. If there really was a peace treaty, then they were in the wrong. But if this was a trick, his crew would die for nothing. "Captain," Amy said quietly. "What are your orders?" Jake looked at the enemy ships on the tactical display. 4 against 1. Bad odds, even for the Retribution. But his ship had faced worse odds before and won. "Get me everything we have on that." "Peace treaty," Jake ordered. "I want to know if it's real." "And if it is real?" Kate asked. Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Then we have some very hard decisions to make." The hour ticked by slowly. The enemy ships held their position, waiting. Jake's crew worked frantically to gather information. But deep in his heart, Jake already knew the truth. The war was over. Earth had lost, and the Retribution was alone in enemy space with nowhere to run. The communication came through at 0300 hours ship time. Jake Morrison sat in his ready room, staring at the blinking light on his desk. For 3 weeks, they had been running through empty space, trying to find a way to contact Earth Command. Now, finally, they had reached a neutral relay station in the Vega system. Jake pressed the button. The screen flickered to life, showing the face of Admiral Helen Brooks. She had been Jake's commanding officer before the Retribution left Earth. She looked older now, tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. "Jake," she said, and her voice carried across the light years between them. "Thank God you're alive." "Admiral," Jake replied. "We need to know what's happening. There are rumors about a peace treaty." Helen's face grew sad. "It's not a rumor. Jake, the war ended 3 months ago. We signed the Treaty of Kepler Station with the Zephyrian Collective." Jake felt the words hit him like a punch to the chest. "What are the terms?" "Bad," Helen said simply. "We keep our home system in the inner colonies. Everything else goes to them. Our fleet is reduced to 50 ships, no expansion beyond the Jupiter line. That's surrender, Jake said. That's survival, Helen corrected. Jake, we were losing. The Zephyrians had us outnumbered 3-1. If we had kept fighting, Earth would have been burned to ash. Jake ran his hand through his hair. What about the retribution? What about my crew? Helen was quiet for a long moment. Jake, your ship is listed as a rogue vessel. The Zephyrians consider you pirates. They want you to surrender at the nearest neutral port. And if we don't, then you'll be hunted down and destroyed, and Earth won't lift a finger to help you. Jake stared at the screen. His crew had fought for Earth, bled for Earth, and now Earth was abandoning them. There's something else, Helen continued. The Zephyrians are offering a reward for your capture, dead or alive. Every bounty hunter and mercenary in the galaxy will be looking for you. So we're on our own, Jake said. I'm sorry, Jake, I truly am. But the decision has been made at the highest levels. The retribution must surrender, or face the consequences. The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone, in his ready room. He sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about his options. They could surrender and face whatever justice the Zephyrians had in mind. They could run to the outer rim and try to disappear, or they could fight. Jake walked onto the bridge. His senior staff was waiting for him. They had all heard the transmission. Well, Danny Wright said. That's that then. Is it? Amy Carter asked. Are we really going to give up? Lisa Harper looked up from her station. Captain, I've been analyzing the treaty documents that came through with the Admiral's message. There's something you need to see. Jake walked over to her station. Lisa's screen showed pages of legal text, but she had highlighted certain sections. Look at this, Lisa said. The treaty allows the Zephyrians to expand into human space if Earth violates any terms. And look at this section about inspections. Jake read the highlighted text. His blood went cold. They can inspect any human world at any time? Gets worse, Lisa said. If they find any violations, they can take control of that world. Jake, this isn't a peace treaty. It's a slow takeover. Dr. Ben Rodriguez stepped forward. I've been talking to our Zephyrian prisoners. One of them let something slip. He mentioned something about a final solution once Earth's defenses are reduced. Jake felt anger building in his chest. They're planning to finish us off. That's what I think, Ben said. Give us a few years to get comfortable, reduce our fleet, then strike when we can't fight back. Kate Johnson spoke up from her navigation station. So what do? We can't fight the entire Zephyrian fleet by ourselves. Can't we? Amy asked. We've been doing pretty well so far. Danny shook his head. We're one ship, Amy. One ship against an entire empire. One ship that they can't see coming, Pete Collins said from the back of the bridge. One ship that knows all their tactics and weaknesses. Jake looked around at his crew. These people had followed him into the dark between stars. They had trusted him to bring them home. Now home didn't want them back. I won't lie to you, Jake said. If we do this, we're on our own. Earth won't help us. We'll be branded as pirates and terrorists. Some of you have families back home. This could destroy any chance you have of seeing them again. The bridge was quiet. Jake could hear the hum of the ship's engines, the whisper of air through the vents. Sir, Amy said, what exactly are you proposing? Jake took a deep breath. The Zephyrians think the war is over. They think Earth is beaten. But what if one ship kept fighting? What if we showed the galaxy that humans don't give up? A guerrilla war, Lisa said. Hit and run attacks, disrupt their supply lines, make them pay a price for their victory. It would be dangerous, Danny said. Probably suicidal. Maybe, Jake agreed. But maybe it would also buy Earth time to rebuild. Maybe it would show other species that the Zephyrians can be beaten. Chief Petty Officer Tony Bell stepped onto the bridge. Tony was the senior enlisted man on the ship, and when he spoke, the crew listened. Captain, Tony said, I've been talking to the crew. They're scared, but they're also angry. The Zephyrians killed a lot of good people. If there's a chance to hit back, most of the crew wants to take it. Jake nodded. What about those who don't? We could drop them off at a neutral port, Kate suggested. Let them make their own choices. No, Jake said. We stay together, or we don't do this at all. I won't force anyone to follow me down this path. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Finally, Lisa spoke for all of them. We're with you, Captain. Whatever happens, we're with you. Jake felt something warm in his chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. Then we keep fighting, he said. The Zephyrians think they've won. Let's show them how wrong they are. Amy grinned from her weapon station. Where do we start? Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. Lisa, find me the biggest, most important Zephyrian target you can. It's time to remind the galaxy that the war isn't over. The Retribution turned away from the neutral station and headed back into the darkness. Behind them, the galaxy celebrated peace. Ahead of them lay war. The Rigel system looked quiet from a distance. Too quiet. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the sensor readings with growing alarm. What they were seeing shouldn't exist. How many ships? Jake asked. Lisa Harper checked, her readings again. 312 capital ships, Captain, plus support vessels. It's the largest fleet I've ever seen. Jake felt his blood turn cold. 300 ships. That was more than the entire human fleet at the start of the war, and they were all Zephyrian. What are they doing out here? Amy, Carter asked from her weapon station. Training exercises, Lisa said, but her voice didn't sound convinced. For 2 weeks, the Retribution had been watching the enemy fleet from the shadows. Pete Collins had pushed their stealth systems to the limit, keeping them invisible while they gathered intelligence. What they had discovered made Jake's worst fears seem small. Dr. Ben Rodriguez appeared on the bridge carrying a tablet full of data. Captain, I've finished analyzing the communications we intercepted. You're not going to like this. Tell me, Jake, said Ben, activated his tablet, showing translated Zephyrian text. They're not here for training. This is called Operation Final Strike. They're planning to attack Earth. The bridge went silent. Outside the viewports, the enemy fleet continued its quiet preparations. When? Jake asked. 6 months, Ben said. As soon as their new ships are ready. The plan is to hit Earth so fast and hard that there won't be time for surrender. Jake sat down in his captain's chair. 6 months, Earth's reduced fleet couldn't stand against this armada. It would be a massacre. There's more, Ben continued. The fleet commander is War Marshal Zexkoth. He's the one who destroyed the Altarian colonies last year. Killed 3 billion people. Danny Wright stepped forward. We have to warn Earth. With what proof? Kate Johnson asked. A few intercepted communications? They'll think we're making it up to justify our actions. Lisa looked up from her station. Actually, we might have more than that. I've been tracking their supply shipments. The amount of fuel and ammunition they're bringing in suggests a major offensive operation. Jake studied the tactical display. The enemy fleet was spread across 3 star systems, but the command ships were all here in Rigel. At the center of the formation was the largest vessel Jake had ever seen. That's the Void Render, Lisa said, following his gaze. Zexkoth's flagship. It's bigger than Earth's largest space station. Pete Collins joined them on the bridge. His uniform was stained with grease and sweat. Captain, I've been thinking about our options. That command ship is the key to everything. What do you mean? Jake asked. Pete pointed at the tactical display. Look at the communication patterns. Every ship in the fleet reports to the Void Render. If we could take out their command and control, the whole fleet would be paralyzed. Amy laughed, but there was no humor in it. Pete, that ship has more guns than the rest of the fleet combined. How are we supposed to get close to it? We don't attack it, Pete said. We get inside it. Jake stared at his chief engineer. Are you insane? Maybe, Pete admitted. But hear me out. Our stealth systems are good enough to get us close. Really, close. Close enough to dock with their hull. Danny Wright shook his head. Even if we could get aboard, that ship has a crew of 50,000. My Marines couldn't fight through that many enemies. We don't fight them, Pete said. We sabotage their main computer systems, shut down their ability to coordinate the fleet. Dr. Rodriguez looked troubled. Pete, you're talking about a suicide mission. Even if we succeeded, how would we get out? Pete was quiet for a moment. We probably wouldn't. The bridge fell silent again. Jake looked around at his crew. These people had followed him through hell and back. Could he ask them to die for a mission that might not even work? There might be another way, Lisa said quietly. What if we don't try to destroy the command ship? What if we just expose their plans? How? Jake asked. Lisa worked at her station for several minutes. The Void Render broadcast command signals to the entire fleet. If we could get close enough to tap into their communication array, we could record everything. Proof of their invasion plans. And then what? Amy asked. Send it to Earth Command? They already told us they won't help us. Not Earth Command, Lisa said. The galactic news networks. Make it public. Force the other species to see what the Zephyrians are really planning. Jake thought about this. It was still dangerous, but it might actually work. If the galaxy knew about the planned attack, they might pressure the Zephyrians to call it off. How close would we need to get? Jake asked. Pete studied the enemy ships, schematics. Within 100 meters of their hull, close enough to physically tap into their external communication arrays. That's practically kissing distance, Danny said. If they spot us at that range, we're dead. They won't spot us, Pete said confidently. I've made some new modifications to our stealth systems. We can stay invisible even at close range. Jake looked around his bridge one more time. This is voluntary. Anyone who wants out can take a shuttle to the nearest neutral port. No questions asked. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Finally, Tony Bell stepped onto the bridge. The chief petty officer looked tired but determined. Captain, Tony said, I've talked to the crew. They know this is dangerous, but they also know what happens to Earth if we don't try. Jake nodded. Very well. Pete, how long do you need to prepare? 12 hours, Pete said. Maybe less. Lisa, I want a complete scan of that command ship. Find me the best approach vector. Amy, load our most advanced sensor probes. We'll need detailed recordings of everything. Danny, prepare a small boarding team just in case we need to go inside. His crew scattered to their tasks. Jake remained on the bridge, staring at the enemy fleet. 300 ships preparing to destroy his home. One human ship standing in their way. The odds were impossible. The mission was probably suicide, but it was the only chance Earth had. Jake activated the ship's communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In 12 hours, we're going to attempt something that has never been tried before. We're going to fly into the heart of the enemy fleet and expose their plans to the galaxy. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Won't lie to you. This is the most dangerous thing we've ever attempted. Some of us might not make it back, but if we succeed, we might save Earth and every human alive. The galaxy thinks the war is over. The galaxy thinks humanity is defeated. Tomorrow we're going to show them how wrong they are. Jake closed the communication channel. Around him, the Retribution hummed with activity as his crew prepared for their greatest challenge. In 12 hours, they would either save their species or die trying. The Void Render filled the view screen like a metal mountain. Jake Morrison had never seen a ship so big. It was longer than some of Earth's cities and bristled with enough weapons to destroy planets. Distance, 150 meters, Lisa, Harper whispered from her station. Still holding steady. The Retribution drifted through space like a ghost. Pete Collins had outdone himself with the stealth modifications. They were so close to the enemy flagship that Jake could see Zephyrian crew members through the windows, but the aliens had no idea they were there. I'm reading massive power signatures, Amy Carter reported quietly. This ship has enough firepower to level a continent. Jake nodded. The Void Render was more than just a command ship. It was a weapon of mass destruction. And in 6 months, it would be pointed at Earth. Boarding team ready, Danny Wright said over the comm. He was leading 12 Marines through the ship's airlocks. Their job was to physically tap into the enemy's communication arrays while the ship's sensors recorded everything. "Pete, how are we doing?" Jake asked. "Stealth systems holding." Pete's voice came from engineering. "But we're pushing them hard. I can give you maybe 20 minutes before we start showing up on their sensors. 20 minutes to gather enough evidence to save Earth." Jake hoped it would be enough. "Danny, you're go for EVA," Jake said. Through the bridge windows, Jake could see tiny figures in spacesuits moving toward the Void Render's hull. Danny and his team looked impossibly small next to the massive enemy ship. "Contact," Danny's voice crackled over the radio. "I'm at the communication array, beginning data tap." Jake watched the minutes tick by. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. "Got it," Danny said. "We're recording everything, battle plans, fleet positions, target lists, this is everything we need." Jake felt a moment of hope. They had done it. They had the proof that would expose the Zephyrian invasion plans to the galaxy. Then the alarm started screaming. "Contact," Lisa shouted. "Enemy patrol ship, bearing 27 Mark IV. They're scanning in our direction." Jake's heart sank. A small Zephyrian destroyer had appeared from behind one of the larger ships. Its sensors were sweeping space, looking for threats. "They've found us," Amy said. "Energy spike on the patrol ship, they're targeting us." "Danny, get back here now," Jake ordered. "Almost finished," Danny replied. "Just need another minute." "We don't have another minute," Jake said. But even as he spoke, he knew Danny wouldn't abandon the mission, not when they were so close. The patrol ship fired. Energy beams lanced through space, missing the Retribution by meters. The near miss overloaded their stealth systems. "Stealth is down," Pete reported. "We're visible." Suddenly, every ship in the Zephyrian fleet knew they were there. Alarms blared across the enemy formation. Weapons powered up. Fighters launched from carrier bays. "Danny, move!" Jake shouted. "Download complete," Danny said. "We're coming back." But as Danny's team tried to return to the Retribution, the Void Render's defensive guns opened fire. Energy blasts filled the space around the ship's hull. 2 of Danny's Marines were caught in the crossfire. Jake watched helplessly as they disappeared in flashes of light. "Danny's been hit," reported Marine Sergeant Mike Davis. "His suit's damaged. He can't make it back to the ship." Jake made a decision that would haunt him forever. "Leave him. Get that data back to the ship." "Sir, I can't." "That's an order, Sergeant." Danny knew the risks. Jake watched as the surviving Marines carried the precious data recordings back to the Retribution. Behind them, Danny Wright floated in space, his damaged suit leaking air. The big security chief raised his hand in a final salute before the Void Render's guns found him. "Data secured," Sergeant Davis reported as his team made it aboard. "We got everything." Jake turned to his helmsman. "Get us out of here. Maximum speed." The Retribution accelerated away from the enemy fleet, but they weren't fast enough. Zephyrian ships were converging from all directions. Fighters swarmed around them like angry insects. Capital ships moved to block their escape routes. "We're surrounded," Kate Johnson said from navigation. Jake looked at the tactical display. Enemy ships filled the screen. There were too many to fight, too many to run from. "Pete, how much power do we have left?" Jake asked. "Engines at 60%, Pete replied. "Weapons at 40%. We took some damage from those near misses." Jake studied the enemy formation. There was only one way out, but it would require everything they had. "Lisa, transmit that data," Jake ordered. "All frequencies, all networks. Make sure the galaxy sees what the Zephyrians are planning." "Transmitting now," Lisa said. "It's going out on every channel I can find." Jake activated the ship's communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We've completed our mission. The galaxy will know the truth about the Zephyrian invasion. Plans. Earth will have time to prepare." He paused, looking around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These people had followed him into the impossible and never wavered. "It's been an honor serving with all of you," Jake said. He turned to Amy. "Target the Void Render's main reactor, everything we have left." Amy's hands flew over her controls. All weapons locked on target. Pete, overload the quantum drive, Jake ordered. Set it to detonate on impact. Jake, Lisa said quietly. There has to be another way. Jake shook his head. The data is transmitted, Earth is warned, but if we let this fleet reach human space, millions will die. We can stop them here. He looked at his crew one last time. Anyone who wants to abandon ship, now's the time. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They would see this through together. Jake sat back in his captain's chair. All hands, brace for impact. It's been a privilege. The Retribution turned toward the massive enemy flagship. Enemy fire filled the space around them, but Pete's modifications held. The ship's hull glowed red from the heat, but they kept flying. Impact in 10 seconds, Kate reported. Jake closed his eyes and thought of Earth. Blue skies, green grass, children playing in parks, everything they were dying to protect. The Retribution struck the Void Render's hull at full speed. The quantum drive overloaded, creating an explosion that could be seen from the next star system. Both ships disappeared in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness. 6 months later, Admiral Helen Brooks stood at a podium on Earth's lunar shipyards. Behind her, workers were putting the finishing touches on a new ship. The nameplate read, UES Retribution 2. The galaxy thought the war was over, Helen said to the assembled crowd. They thought humanity was defeated. Captain Morrison and his crew proved them wrong. Their sacrifice saved not just Earth, but every free species in the galaxy. She looked up at the stars, where somewhere the wreckage of the first Retribution still floated in space. The Zephyrian invasion fleet never launched. Their plans were exposed, their command structure destroyed. The other species of the galaxy saw the truth and acted. The war criminals who planned genocide are now in prison. Helen smiled sadly. The galaxy learned that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology or our numbers. It's our refusal to give up when everything depends on it. She gestured to the new ship behind her. The Retribution sails again. And as long as ships bear that name, the galaxy will remember. Sometimes the few must stand against the many. Sometimes one ship must face an empire. And sometimes, that's enough. The ceremony ended, but Helen remained at the podium, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was a little safer because Jake Morrison and his crew had refused to let evil win. The galaxy had relaxed, thinking the war was over. They had learned too late that for humanity, the war never ends. Not as long as there are still people worth protecting.